Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us today for the crucial launch of a very significant book, The Khalistan Conspiracy. It's a book that looks back at the events that shaped a large part of 2 decades across Punjab, events that pushed Punjab back by more than 2 decades. And we're looking not just at the events, but what shaped those events and also the political gains around those events. So if you've lived through that period in Punjab, or if you're even a keen observer of things in Punjab, you may be taken aback by some of the revelations in that book, but I'm not going to disclose anything else right now. I will just move quickly to introduce the panelists. First, Mr. GBS Sidhu. After 26 years in the Research and Analysis Wing, he retired as the Special Secretary in 1998. He is the author of The Khalistan Conspiracy. A former RNAW officer unravels the path to 1984. Before that, he wrote the book Sikkim, Dawn of Democracy. Mr. Sidhu, thank you very much for joining us. We also have Mr. Terry Mileski. He's a television journalist, a veteran journalist, in fact, from the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, where he worked for 4 decades. In 1985, he went to Ireland to cover the Air India bombing and has followed the story behind it for 35 years. He has recently authored a rather explosive report called Khalistan, a Project of Pakistan. And last but not the least, Mr. Jagdeep Chokar. He's a former professor and dean at IIM Ahmedabad, and also a founder member of the Association for Democratic Reforms. Now, before we move any further, because this is a formal launch and we have to make do and innovate in the times of the pandemic, I'd request all the panelists to just show the book, and so we can just say that the proceedings are now officially on. Lovely.
Doesn't prove that I read it, but I did.
Absolutely, absolutely. So before I also move a little bit further, I'd just like to say that at the end of the session, we will be taking a 10-minute question answer from the audience and the participants. But let's quickly just dive into this session. And Mr. Sidhu, you're the man of the moment. So tell us about motivation for writing the book, especially after all these years. Tell us a little bit about the book as well.
Actually, the main motivation for writing this book is let the people of India know as to what happened during those crucial years and who were the persons responsible for doing that and what were their objective to do all that, so that people of India can now finally take a decision as to how to bring about a decent closure to the most horrific period of India's post-independence history and decide as to what should be done now. This is the main thing. About the book, actually, so far, large number of books have been written on the related subjects, but none of those books have given a solid evidence to pinpoint as to who were the persons responsible for all that, who was running and pulling the strings from One Akbar Road, and why did they do that? And how did they try to achieve their objectives? Short-term political advantage was the main object. So I served in RNAW for 26 years, from February 1972 to April 1998. During this period, I remained posted for 3 years from September 76 to 79 in Ottawa, Canada, and had the pleasure and privilege of knowing lots of people. And then on my return to headquarters in October 79, I was asked to do certain tasks which had direct bearing to the contents of my book. And gradually I came to know lot of things who had a direct relevance to this subject. Actually, by the time I retired and much later, I had collected a lot of evidence to start writing this book. But there were a couple of impediments. The biggest one being the Official Secrets Act, which doesn't allow authors to write books on such sensitive matters before the expiry of 30 years. Secondly, I was also involved in the merger of Sikkim to one of the 2 landmark operations that RNW completed. The first one was the independence, liberation of Bangladesh actually. And the Sikkim's merger also is as important because it changed the map of India, and it is a block of Chinese expansion southward. If we look into this operation under the current situation, it should be considered as one of the historic operations. And within 2.5 years, we were able to merge Sikkim as a 22nd state of India with the 36th amendment to the Constitution of India. And when I decided to read, right, you have a question now? You want to
Oh
ask?
yeah, no, I was actually going to dive back into the current book first, and just come to, some of the crucial points from your newly released book, The Khalistan Conspiracy, where you actually write that, till the end of 1979, there was no organized pro-Khalistan movement either in India or in Canada. And in fact, that you say in your book that it picks up momentum only when the Indira Gandhi-led Congress wins and comes to power in January 1980. Now, fascinating revelations that you give further is that the genesis of the problem can be traced back to 1978. And you talk about the prime movers as Zail Singh and Sanjay Gandhi. So do you want to elaborate a little bit about that first?
First, to address your first question about the non-existence of a organized pro-Khalistan movement, actually, till the end of my stay in Canada, till the end of 79, I knew only one person by the name of Kuldeep Singh Sodhi, the self-styled Consul General of Khalistan, Jagjit Singh Chauhan's man, who used to take active part in propagating. And he was known to be an ISI agent. Then on my return here, I read a book of one of he was the Home Secretary B.G. Deshmukh. He has written in almost middle of 79, he visited Punjab, met a lot of people in Harmandir Sahib, some SGPC member. On the way, he met a lot of farmers, and they took him to the home. He has written in the book that till that time, Punjab was a haven of peace and tranquility. But suddenly after 79, what happened? That everybody was talking about Khalistan. So that was the result of a conscious decision taken by Sanjay Gandhi and Zail Singh with the blessings of Mrs. Gandhi and their friend Kamal Nath, that we should win the next elections due before January 1985 on the issue of what I have named as Khalistan Bhindranwale issue. So here it starts what I called as Operation 2. Actually, the book is written in a form of top secret operation conducted by some senior and influential Congress leaders functioning from Mrs. Gandhi's personal residential office. I called it 1 Akbar Road. So it has two separate phases. Phase 1, Op 1 I call, Phase 2, Op 2. Phase 1 was a Punjab-centric operation which ended with Mrs. Gandhi coming to power in January 1982. And Phase 2 starts from January. The main aim of this was to use Bhindranwale Khalistan issue to win that election.
So I will get in Mr. Milewski at this point. Mr. Milewski, it's interesting that you trace it back even further in your report. In fact, you trace it to somewhere around 1973. But I think that's where the similarity pretty much ends between what Mr. Sidhu is saying and what you're saying. Because as Mr. Sidhu is saying that, he puts it on that 1 Akbar Road gang. But you've actually squarely put this on Pakistan and have even mentioned at some point that, how Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was smart from the creation of Bangladesh.
And indeed, that goes back all the way to 1971. And many people I've spoken to would trace it even further back. Hussain Haqqani, for example, the former Pakistani ambassador in Washington, who's now, of course, out of sorts with the present government, and has retired from the Pakistani diplomatic corps. He says, oh, no, it goes back even further to the mid-1960s. And that was when, according to him, experts in Pakistan were writing that because Pakistan was relatively weak vis-a-vis India, that therefore it should pursue a strategy of what he called irregular warfare. That is to say, not outright warfare, but warfare by subterfuge, by the use of proxies to try to promote trouble in India and to bleed India. I don't think that Mr. Sidhu and I disagree about all of those antecedents. He's saying, I believe, that elements of the Congress Party of India saw an opportunity and exploited it. Not that they created the concept out of whole cloth, but Zulfikar Ali Bhutto was quoted by several sources and said so publicly at the time that Pakistan was interested after the 71 war and the breakaway of Bangladesh in revenge, in setting up some sort of buffer state between Pakistan and India, cutting off India's land access to Kashmir, all these grand strategic goals, none of which has come to pass, except the initial goal of causing trouble for India. And so you can, I think, trace the Khalistan movement further back than Sanjay Gandhi or Zail Singh. I think you can trace it further, but it certainly exploded, if that's the word, into reality after that, and particularly, of course, with the rise of Bhindranwale.
Right, so Mr. Chokar, yes, Mr. Sidhu.
Actually, what Danny is saying is mainly true, because Pakistan had been nursing this, you can say, ambition to break away part of India, that is Punjab, but nothing happened till 1979 or till 80. They used to carry some smuggling operations or intelligence gathering operations, because Punjab population was not receptive to their operations or this type of, but it is Sanjay Gandhi or Congress, later on Rajiv Gandhi and his friends like Nehru and Fatehpur and others, who created a very congenial situation in Punjab, which was taken advantage of by Zia-ul Haq. He opened two fronts, one in Punjab, one in Kashmir. Had the problem in Punjab not been there, Kashmir situation would not have deteriorated to that extent. I have written that thing.
Right.
In Pakistan, it was there, but no, I never saw anybody talking about Khalistan or there is any movement sort of thing or people sympathizing with till that time. Actually.
Right. I'm going to go to Mr. Chokar, but I think Mr. Sidhu, you need to move your camera a little, your face, yes, is getting cut. Thank you. Mr. Chokar, now you heard these, both the views here. Where do you stand? What is your view on it? Do you agree that, all this was done looking ahead, it's a 5-year plan, looking ahead at the elections?
After listening to these two learned gentlemen and have been read the book and of course Mr. Milevsky's paper also, I actually feel like King Solomon. We have Mr. Milevsky claiming it was a Pakistan operation, Mr. Sidhu claiming it was an operation started and done from Wan Akbar Road. I personally am not, obviously I am not absolutely sure what it is. I must first of all compliment Mr. Sidhu at a very, very comprehensive account, and I am amazed at the sharpness of his memory, how he has reproduced dates and times and conversations, unless of course he was wise enough to keep records of all this. But whatever it is a very authentic account. And but to me, it seems that attributing it to entirely Wan Akbar Road or Zail Singh, Sanjay Gandhi and Indira Gandhi and Rajiv Gandhi, and to say that this was started with the intention of winning the 1985 election, to me, with due apologies, Mr. Sidhu, it seems a little far-fetched. It has already been widely talked about that Bhindranwale was the creation of Zail Singh. And Zail Singh was able to persuade Sanjay Gandhi, or Sanjay Gandhi was a willing accomplice. And then it became kind of a Frankenstein monster, which grew and grew and grew. But I also believe that there was a fair degree of support, both moral, emotional, and financial, from the Sikh diaspora in the West. Mr. Sidhu, as he has said that in 1979, there was just one person in Canada who would do this. And it was known that he was an ISI person. So therefore, the source is in Pakistan. So I think it is a much more complex affair. The Congress is certainly guilty, there is no doubt. But there are also other people who are guilty. There are, anytime somebody says that XYZ is interfering in my affairs, XYZ is interfering, but what am I doing? So India was at fault, Indian government was at fault. I would say the Punjab leadership of the Akalis was also not blame-free.
Right.
There were international disputes. People were exploiting each other or trying to exploit each other. All that added up. It was a big mess.
I think we'll come into a little bit more of the details, with the Akalis and the role of, the various state governments and everything else in just a short while. But I just want to go back to Mr. Sidhu and, ask him if he wants to, respond to your question that, this about the Sikh diaspora, about the fact that, they were, sorry, go ahead, Mr. Sidhu.
First, actually, let me clear. I have given evidence to, actually, for everything which I have written in the book regarding that this type of thinking was already going on in Punjab, or there was a big sport amongst the diaspora. That is a separate thing. Let us take the case of Akalis' demands. Once they have decided to win the elections before 1985, they have to prolong this type of agitation or extremism in Punjab. And there were 2-3 occasions, definite occasions, when the central government could have decided this thing and finished this agitation. Number one was in November 1983, 3rd of November, my father-in-law had fixed and decided a formula after mediating this, and even after meeting Bhindranwale in his room. Everybody was ready to resolve this issue, and a statement was finalized and Delhi shown to the Akali Dal people, and they approved of it, they returned. And this statement was changed overnight by Mrs. Gandhi. And the harshest statement, which was read at the parliament next day, was not acceptable to the Akalis. And number two, there was an occasion when central government could have intervened. When on 25th April 1983, DIG Jalandhar Atwal was killed while exiting the Golden Temple complex. Why did they not intervene at that time? Because it was not in their plan to finish this type of agitation much before the next elections were due. I have given every argument in support of my contention, some hard evidence, some analytical basis. I have worked on the analysis just for 10 years in China and other. I do not write anything which is not tenable, which is not supported by facts. Each word written here in my book, I weighed it with the acceptability and whether I should write it, whether I should accept it, there is sufficient evidence behind that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written. I didn't want to write a scandalous report. Thank you.
Can I second that briefly, just by pointing out that how valuable and how remarkable it is in the whole literature, the extensive literature on this topic, to get an account which is from somebody who had a front row seat, like Mr. Sidhu, and one on which every page is jam-packed with facts, details, names, places, dates, evidence, in a world where we read plenty of stuff that is just a rant, lots of opinion and no facts. This is a breath of fresh air, and he lays out a whole bunch of evidence for his theory. And let's agree, surely, that I don't think we should have an argument here about it was all the fault of the Congress Party. No, it was all the fault of Pakistan. There's plenty of blame to go around. Blame the British for partition, blame the Pakistanis, blame the Indian government generally, never mind just the Congress Party. So there's plenty of blame to go around for what went wrong, why this problem exploded with so much bloodshed. But I would just like to point out that Mr. Sidhu has certainly amassed a vast amount of detailed evidence. It is extremely credible account, which I think will take a place of honor in the literature.
Right. I think I'm going to ask Mr. Sidhu at this point to just read out an excerpt, a short excerpt as well, which I think he wants to convey a message to the Sikh diaspora. But also, I'd like to tell the participants that when Mr. Sidhu is talking about his father-in-law, he is talking about Sardar Swaran Singh, who was the External Affairs Minister as well. You know, there's a lot of validation that comes from there as well. Mr. Sidhu, if you could just read out a little bit very briefly before we go ahead.
Actually, this is a message for the Sikh diaspora. I've written here, Pakistan is using pro-Khalistan elements in the same manner as Indira Gandhi had used Bhindranwale to further her party's prospects. However, the end result of such operations proves usually disastrous for the persons or parties who allow themselves to be used for furthering their controllers' interests. Their handlers, at the most, stand to lose a certain amount of money, time and resources spent on such operations in the hope that the risk-reward ratio might one day turn in their favor and pay dividends on their original investments. One para more, actually, it is understandable that a certain number of persons involved in pro-Khalistan activities are directly or indirectly being financially compensated by the ISI and are also drawing pecuniary benefits and other benefits resulting from their presence in certain Western countries. Logical argument will have no effect on such people. My advice to Sikhs who join or support such protest, even if it's out of mere curiosity, is to see through their game of destabilizing Punjab, which has still not fully recovered from the consequences of a disastrous decade and a half following the launch of Operation 2 by Indira Gandhi. I think that sends a fairly strong message and to the silent majority. They must stand up and don't tolerate the nuisance of the pro-Khalistani elements.
So I think we can weigh that in with Mr. Milewski and ask him, bluntly, what's been the reaction to your rather explosive report in Canada itself?
Well, as Mr. Sidhu knows well, the situation in Canada has changed dramatically since the lack of interest in Khalistan in the late 1970s in Canada. Canada has probably the world's largest share of the Sikh diaspora. It's about 500,000 in Canada, and they are politically influential. They know how to organize themselves at election time and how to get sympathy from politicians who want to get elected in certain crucial political districts in both British Columbia and Ontario. These tend to be swing ridings, which can turn elections, and they've exploited that power very capably. But the situation in Canada today is that a very small rump, if you will, a very small element of Khalistanis, they've claimed the right to speak for all Sikhs in Canada, and indeed around the world. So that if you say a bad thing about Khalistan, then you're anti-Sikh, as though the vast majority of Sikhs who reject the concept of Khalistan, they're also anti-Sikh. I mean, it makes no sense that they're against their own people. It doesn't make any sense at all. And it was a surprise to some people in Canada, I think, to read of the microscopic level of support for the only nominally separatist party to run in the most recent Punjab elections. Ranjit Man's splinter group, the Amritsar splinter group of the Shiromani Akali Dal, which gained 0.32%, a fraction of 1% of the votes in the last Punjab elections. And a lot of people in Canada, I must say, who were very angry about my article because it wasn't very complimentary about the cause of Khalistan. A lot of people were very surprised to learn that most of the world's Sikhs are not Khalistanis. They thought that this is what Sikhs were all about. And many politicians are surprised by this because they think that to be Sikh is to want independence from India. And they were a little surprised, I think, by the evidence that apparently it's not so.
Right, so Mr. Chokar, do you have anything to say to this? I find it also ironical, when we get in Pakistan into this conversation that, here's a country where the Sikh population is actually depleting by thousands, where, you've got so many cases of discrimination against the Sikhs in your country. There's been an attack on the Gurdwaras there, and yet this is a country that continues to espouse this cause in a way, whether it's helping with weapons or, helping them smuggle through the borders. So do you think in the changed geopolitical environment, this will continue?
This is a very hard question or issue to respond to. And I would like to situate this in the broader context, which is, the combination of religion and politics. Now, that is what is causing problems, I think, in several parts of the world. And of course, the problems of France are quite uppermost in a lot of people's minds. But religion and politics is a very explosive combination. And once it takes root, then it is extremely difficult to eradicate it. I personally believe what Dr. S. Radhakrishnan, one of the early presidents of India, said, who was also a great philosopher. He said, and I quote him, "Religion is what we do when we are alone." Now, my experience of religion in my 76 years is, religion is done out in the open, in public. In India, a Vishal Bhagavati Jagaran is held on the intersection of two major roads. And, everything that is done in public view. So that is in my opinion, complete negation of the concept of religion, and mixing it with politics becomes very explosive. That perhaps is why, that is why Pakistan was created. That is why Bangladesh was created. That is why a country where, as you say, Josna Gurdwaras have been destroyed, etc., that country continues to support the cause of so-called Khalistan, because it is a handle to screw India with. So the geopolitical situation, in my opinion, is such that it will not finish, because China and the US are playing this game even here.
Right. And I think that will always lead to another session, a broader conversation. But I'm coming back to Mr. Sidhu for...
Let me just say one more thing. There is a saying that when two elephants fight, it is the grass which suffers. So this region is the theater where these two elephants are fighting, and it will continue to simmer in one form or the other.
I'm coming back to an excerpt from your book, Mr. Sidhu, and to a different topic. And it's a question, it's a burning question that has been on many people's minds and lips, that how was Golden Temple allowed to be fortified to such an extent? I think in page 148, you talk of how Bhindranwale could not be seen to have gone meekly. His last fight had to be befitting his image so people could realize what a tough enemy he was. Irony is that those who installed him would never have anticipated that he would have become so powerful, Mr. Sidhu.
Actually, this also supports my theory that Operation Two Handlers, one Akbar Road people, wanted to build his image so that ultimately, when the time came to crush him, he should not be going meekly. Otherwise, people would say that he was a very small person. The arms and ammunition used to come openly. And one or two occasions it was checked. They found Sten gun and other thing in the Langar provision trucks, and it was allowed to stay. They could have finished this thing, as my father-in-law told Bhindranwale in October, November 1983, that I am, 82 rather, that I am surprised that why Government of India is not, they can finish you in 2 days. But my advice is that you, before that happens, you go back to your Chowk Mehta Gurdwara. So his image was being built in order to project him as a big person who was trying to destabilize India, trying to create terror, so that when the time comes to crush him, majority of the Hindus would feel relieved that such a man has been neutralized and the danger to the national integrity has been averted.
So, Mr. Milewski, I know you've spoken about how there is, this voting bloc that comes into the picture in Canada when it comes to this movement. But I want to ask you actually, what is the flavor amongst the people there? Of course, we've got that whole thing about Trudeau unwittingly sitting down for a meal, with and raising hackles back home, or that report in 2018, I think, that scrubbed all references to Khalistani extremism. So, for India, how much of reliability factor does Canada hold?
Well, I think the problem continues to be a serious problem in Canada-India relations, which ought to be extremely friendly. There ought to be a boom in trade. There ought to be superbly good relations between two democracies with many common interests, and a lot of people-to-people exchanges, and there's about 1 million people of Indian origin who are Canadian citizens now. So it's not just the 500,000 Sikhs, there's another 500,000 people of Indian origin. So it ought to be much better than it is. And this keeps coming up because of the miscalculation made by Canadian politicians of all parties about the legitimacy and the extent of support for Khalistan in Canada. It becomes an obstacle and an embarrassment. You mentioned the 2018 case. Let's be clear, what happened was that a convicted Khalistani terrorist, he confessed he attempted to assassinate a Punjab cabinet minister in 1986, somehow wangled an invitation to a glittering reception for the visiting Canadian Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, in New Delhi and in Bombay, another one, and had his picture taken with Justin Trudeau's wife for a very nice selfie. And the question then came, well, how on earth did this person get an invitation? And the answer, of course, was that he had done good work for Trudeau's governing Liberal Party, and had become, over the years since his conviction, an insider in the Liberal Party. How did that happen? Because as soon as this became known, of course, it was an enormous embarrassment. And then the Canadian government blundered further by saying, oh, well, it was all cooked up by the Indians' rogue elements. That was the phrase. Rogue elements in the Indian government had cooked it up so that this guy got an invitation to the Canadian High Commissioner's reception. I mean, how did they write the invitation list? I mean, the reception was at the High Commissioner's residence. Anyway, that is too much detail, but the point is that it continues to be, not the polite word is irritant, but it's worse than that. It's become a serious obstacle over many years now to Canadian-Indian relations, and it's time for that to end. It's time for people to get the message, smell the coffee, say, look, this is history now, let's move on, and let's once and for all make it clear that Canada is not out there trying to promote an independence movement in Punjab.
So when we talk about those dark years, I think we cannot not talk about what happened in November 1984 on the anti-Sikh program. So Mr. Sidhu, you have written that soon after Rajiv Gandhi was administered the oath of office of the Prime Minister on the evening of 31st October, the One Akbar Road gang, a group, told Home Minister Narasimha Rao that they were taking over his supervisor power over Delhi police for better coordination and handling of the anti-Sikh riots. Can you elaborate a little bit about this? I think at some level you were involved and yet trying to step back a little bit from all this that was going on.
Actually, I couldn't have made such a serious allegation unless I had something to back up this thing. First one was Vinay Satpathy has written some sort of a biography on Narasimha Rao. The name of that book is Half Lion. In his interview to the Economic Times Journal in Focus supplement of June 29 to July 2016, he has written that soon after Rajiv Gandhi became Prime Minister, someone very close to Rajiv Gandhi from the PMO telephoned Narasimha Rao that for the better coordination of the so-called riots which has taken place in the city, we would like to take over your supervisory power over the police for a better coordination. So what type of this coordination was ultimately used to turn the riots into some sort of anti-Sikh program. Second source was Ambassador K.C. Singh, retired, who was ambassador to some of the Middle East countries and finally retired as secretary to the MEA. He told me recently that on 1st of, you can say November, early in the morning, President Zail Singh came out of the Rashtrapati Bhavan and he saw a lot of smoke coming out of the nearby buildings. So he immediately called Narasimha Rao to check up as to what was happening. Narasimha Rao did not respond. But unfortunately for him, he had to call Zail Singh in the evening to request him to send President's bodyguard with a vehicle to save his friend's life who was living in a Brijvasa farmhouse. So you can imagine the plight of the Home Minister who is supposed to be the cadre controlling authority of the Indian Police Service in the whole of India. He could not save the life of his friend in Delhi. So that is good enough to say. The reason was that I think this Operation Blue Star had served their purpose, and Mrs. Gandhi was in for having a nice victory in the next elections. But unfortunately, her assassination by her two guards changed the situation entirely. They could have lost the elections because people would have thought that if they could not protect Mrs. Gandhi's life, what sort of government they will be able to provide. So I have written all the reasons. I don't want to take the time.
And all the participants here, I'm sure they're going to end this session and quickly go and get the book. But Mr. Chokar, I'm just going to stay with you for another question. And, again, when we talk of all the dark years in Punjab, it's usually about, we talk about Sikh separatism, or we talk about the anti-Sikh riots of 84, or we talk about the Sikh casualties. But there's very little mention of the Hindu community that suffered enormously. A lot of people left their land, their properties. They were victims of the violence. So what kind of closure are we looking at for both the communities? I know on the ground, nobody, I think everybody is, tight-knit and together. But I think there's some sort of closure that we often talk about closure for, the Sikh victims, but we seldom talk about it for the Hindu community, Mr. Chokar.
Well, first of all, let me clarify that I don't speak on behalf of any community, Hindu.
No, not me.
Yeah, I just want to clarify. Number two, I think the Hindu population of Punjab were in a way more severe victims because they were, Akalis were fighting amongst each other. Bhindranwale was fighting the Akalis, Congress was messing up something else. So in all this, the suffering were actually also experienced by the non-Sikh population. As a matter of fact, there was this horrendous incident which Mr. Sidhu has also written about of Mr. Jagat Narayan, the
1981, yes.
Having been shot, and then a year or so later his son being shot. These kinds of events I would assume, made the Hindu community very, very apprehensive. In either case, if it became a Khalistan, they would worry what to do. If it doesn't become a Khalistan, this uncertainty would continue. So I think the Hindu or non-Sikh population of Punjab was a big sufferer. And when you talk about closure, I am not very sure about what closure is. For people who lost their family members and relatives, there can never be closure. The closure will happen after generations. And with due respect to Mr. Sidhu, he has suggested the formation of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission like the South African one. I think too much has happened after that. Indira Gandhi met a violent death. Sanjay Gandhi met a violent death. Rajiv Gandhi met a violent death. If somebody were to say there is some kind of a justice in the world, in a way it has happened. But that is not the point. The point is, at the end of today, when Mr. Sidhu has raised 25 questions that the Reconciliation Commission should deal with, I read those questions in detail several times. I started to wonder, how will this Truth and Reconciliation Commission get to the answers of these questions? To me, some of the questions are today not answerable. So it is, as Mr. Milevsky said, it's better to, just get on and look at the future rather than the past.
And could I just add one thing? It would appear to me that that's exactly what the majority of the population of Punjab certainly is now doing by voting as they do. They have voted in a fiercely anti-separatist Sikh chief minister. He seems to be popular, Amarinder Singh. And it seems that history has passed by those who would like to keep these flames alive. Their efforts are failing. That's how it seems to me.
Wonderful. So I'd just like to tell.
My closure actually is, just for a minute, my closure is based on the thing that there are 13 commissions, committees, and SITs to resolve this anti-Sikh program issues. So why prolong all these things? And let us finish it for once for all by trying to know as to what has happened and how many Sikhs were killed. According to one estimate, I think Amarinder Singh also said recently, that during this period, 35,000 Sikhs and Hindus were killed, or they were assassinated, whatever it is. Some of them are not even traceable. So let us at least give a closure to those families that those people had died, and you please don't wait for their return, etc. Closure is so many things. Let people know the truth about all that. People are going to think one thing or other thing. Let us put an end to that. That is a closure, actually.
So I actually want to briefly ask Mr. Chokar, coming from this only, when we're talking of closure, what about, the families, the victims of the 1984 riots who also not got justice, who've gone again, as Mr. Sidhu said, from one commission, one committee, one commission to another?
I completely empathize and understand and agree with. But at the same time, I also feel that if 13 commissions and committees, etc., have not been able to achieve anything, how will the 14th achieve it? The people not getting justice is a very, very sad commentary on the judicial system of the country, which is not getting any better even today, as we speak today. The Indian judicial system or criminal justice system is I'm afraid, extremely slow, unreliable, etc., etc. I don't want to say more and not be ordered for contempt of court. Also is happening with the drop of a hat in India. So the justice system in the country is weak. It is infirm. Therefore, for anybody, unless you happen to be an anchor of a television program, to get justice is not easy at all, if at all. You get it.
And it's really, really unfortunate, that families have passed away waiting for that justice of, those events that unfolded in 1984. I've got a couple of questions that I'll quickly ask you, Mr. Sidhu. I think Mr. Kuldeep Singh from Vancouver, who runs the Punjabi radio broadcast and television programs. I think it's about 4:30 a.m. for him in the morning. So his first question to you is that normally a book is either an academic work or a memoir. You have mixed both. Why?
Actually, he's partly right. And for a memoir, one has to be a part of the book. But I have written this book as a sort of analytical report by an analyst of RNAW who have worked long on analysis desks. For producing an analytical report, you have to disengage your personal self from the content of the book and weigh your own evidence against other evidences available, and then also search for other truth. So that is why you will see in this book, myself is totally taken out. I have used my name and other thing wherever it is absolutely essential.
I think you already mentioned a part of this answer earlier, but why is this book being published so late?
That was the requirement of the Official Secrets Act. I couldn't have written before 30 years. And this is the same thing in UK also. And others, I had to write a book on Sikkim, which was getting much later. Actually, I should have written that way only.
Right. Mr. Milewski, I think this question is possibly for you because Mr. Pradeep Kumar, he's asking, is it relevant, the referendum 2020? We of course know in India there are no takers, but how is it being, being looked at in Canada with that fringe?
It's a good question, and I wish I knew the answer because it has faded completely from public view.
Yeah.
This is November of 2020.
Yes.
And for years, we have been told that November of 2020, this would be the time when the Sikhs would rise and they would say yes to Khalistan, and they would show the world and the United Nations that the Sikhs want an independent country. Has anyone seen this referendum happening? Well, we have seen this past summer in Canada and in London, in England, some registration events, register to vote. You can register online, you can show on those. In Vancouver, for example, they had what was called the Bhai Talwinder Singh Parmar registration center for voting in the referendum. Parmar, of course, being the mastermind of the catastrophic Air India bombing that killed 331 people in 1985. So it's an interesting choice, even a macabre choice of a title for a voting registration center, somebody who slaughtered hundreds of innocent civilians, which sort of made nonsense of the whole undertaking. So the short answer is, I don't know what's happening with the referendum. And the longer answer is,
taken over, possibly.
And that may be because common sense has prevailed, right. And that there's simply such a lack of interest in it, even among the Sikh diaspora in Canada.
Of course, it's banned here in India. So I think we are pretty much aware that the referendum 2020 has been banned.
I think that's a mistake. Yeah, that's a mistake, by the way, to ban it and to criminalize people who merely promote it. Let fresh air come in. Let them fall flat on their faces in public. If the interest is so low, what do you have to fear? I mean, presumably the government of India can read the voting results in Punjab as well as I can, or better. They know that the thing is collapsing under its own weight and that there is very little interest. So don't give them an excuse, is my point, for saying, well, of course we got very low numbers because the Indian government banned it. Well, and so then we can keep the flame alive for another generation. That's a bad idea.
The website and all the information has been blocked as well, but I've got your final comments, Mr. Milewski. I will ask Mr. Sidhu also to give in his, if he has anything to say on this, or he just wants to give us a couple of lines and what he sees in the future after having gone through all these years, or we've read about the way forward. And do you want to just briefly say anything else, Mr. Sidhu, to add to that?
Actually, what Terry is saying is absolutely true. There is hardly any evidence of support in Punjab for the 2020 project. And if they try to work out a solution, which I have suggested, TRC, etc., it will further alienate them. And I must say that after reading my book, the silent majority in Canada, UK, and US, they must rise and show them that the strength lies with them, not with the minority who is propagating pro-Khalistan activities. They have their own vested interests to serve. Some are in the pay of ISI. Some are just joining them out of fun. They must now show up. That's all. And I'm sure everything will be okay in the coming years.
Mr. Chokar, yes, please.
Since you asked Mr. Sidhu for his kind of final comments, I thought I should also make my,
Coming to you in any case. Yes.
which is that I would like to congratulate Mr. Sidhu for bringing out facts as he knew them, and he was in a very pivotal position where actually he was in a very peculiar position where he was in it and out of it both. In a couple of places in the book, he has said that he opted out and he said he didn't want to get involved in this, and he went to the analysis desk. Now, when I read that bit, I was reminded of a share by Mirza Ghalib, which said, and very apologies, I will explain it to you later, which says, "Khoob parda hai, chilman se lage baithe hain." Sorry, it is by Daag, not Ghalib. खूब पर्दा है, चिलमन से लगे बैठे हैं, साफ छुपते भी नहीं, सामने आते भी नहीं. So Mr. Sidhu had a very, very special role and a special position, and I think he has done a great service to the society in India and also in Canada, I think.
Absolutely. And I hope that, everybody listening in will go and order that book in just, you can order it on Amazon. And of course, it will be available soon in all your bookstores. So, get the book. There is plenty of interesting material in there. There's a lot of hard work. There's a lot of research and fascinating revolutions, as I said right in the beginning. Mr. Chokar, Mr. Milevsky, and Mr. Sidhu, thank you all very much for joining us today for this book launch. And Mr. Sidhu, we wish you all the best with this new book. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you very much.